Before we begin, let's bring you updates from the Nigerian Economic Summit. It's the second day, day 2 of the 31st Nigerian Economic Summit, with discussions around Nigeria's evolving fiscal landscape with a spotlight on tax and policy reform. Now, the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Tax and Fiscal Policy Reform, and that's Taiwo Oyedele, delivered an address of offering insights into the direction and goals of the reform agenda. Oyedele outlined how the proposed changes aim to simplify Nigeria's tax system, enhance revenue efficiencies, and reduce the burden on compliant businesses and relieve pressure on lower income earners. The session emphasized the need for policy clarity and consistent implementation to drive investor confidence and long-term economic stability. Now, he discouraged sensationalization as well as, and the need to co-create and co-execute with the government, while reaffirming the government's commitment to transparency, fairness, and growth-oriented fiscal policy. We're now joined by our correspondent. Joining us now, I beg your pardon, instead of our correspondent, we have with us the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, none other than Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. He joins us live now. Good to have you, Mr. Oyedele, on the program. Day 2 of the most crucial conversation when it comes to tax reforms. Nigerians are gearing up for that tax reform to kick off in 2026. What should the Nigerian business community take away as a central message in terms of the tax reforms that are being pushed by the Bola Tinubu administration?
Yeah, thank you very much for asking. I think for the business community, the message has been very clear, which is that these reforms have been introduced not because government wants to collect more taxes from them, not because government wants to increase their tax burden, but because government wants to, number one, de-risk the issues that they face around the business environment, particularly from the tax side. Things like taxing capital, taxing investment, and also to reduce even the corporate tax rate. It's also to provide simplification, and the reforms are pro-growth. So for businesses, this is like one of the most exciting times for us to look forward to what is on offer from January 2026, where also the harmonization of various taxes will reduce the administrative costs and the burden on businesses. The whole idea being that we want businesses to do better, we want businesses to grow, and then when they grow and they have the capacity to pay taxes, then they will pay taxes. That's why these reforms would exempt small businesses with turnover, that's revenue, of 100 million or less per annum. From 2026, their corporate tax rate will be 0%. So beyond the business community, I think for the Nigerian people generally, this is also an exciting time because from January next year, low-income earners will be exempted completely from paying PAYE, that's personal income tax. Middle class or middle income earners will see a reduction in the PAYE that they have been paying before now. Altogether, that means more take-home pay on one hand. And on the other hand, that's about 97-98% of the Nigerian workers that will benefit. On the other hand, the basic items that they consume, from buying food to paying for education and healthcare, the cost of producing those items would also reduce because government will start granting input tax credits, what we call credit. When you pay for VAT, you get the money back on assets, on overhead, including services for businesses. So even media like News Central, for example, you guys never have been able to claim input credit on VAT that you incur on your cameras, on your laptops, on your mobile phone, and airtime. From January next year, remember to tell your accountant, keep the record, and you see more money will come in your direction. So honestly, I think everybody should be excited about these reforms.
Right. But at the core of this is a lot of arguments about whether or not government is using this, tax reforms as a way of increasing, internally generated revenue. And so one has to ask where the balance will lie between the government's need to increase government revenue while reducing the burden of compliant taxpayers, especially lower income earners. Where will the balance lie? How will this be? Be reformed?
Yeah, I like that question actually. So it's an interesting question. It's a little magic that we have in there where you are saying to people you're going to reduce their tax burden, and then you're saying you're going to collect more revenue. And your question is, how do we reconcile it? We have a reconciliation of that in a way that is a win-win for society. What do I mean by that? In Nigeria today, you have a significant amount of tax evasion, which means there are people who are actually earning a lot of money and they're not paying taxes. There are people who are able to use their connection to get waivers of everything waivable, which is creating an uneven playing field with other players. So what we are trying to do with this reform is lower the tax burden, but get everybody that needs to pay by closing the opportunities for tax evasion. Because what that does is when you allow evasion to thrive, you actually punish the honest person who is doing their business, earning their income, and trying their best to pay their taxes. The other guys who are not paying their taxes are having an undue advantage. By getting everybody to pay their own fair share, even if it's a lower percentage, the country as a whole will collect more money. And that money, the second part of that conversation is, how do you ensure it's utilized to benefit society so people don't finish paying taxes and then have to spend their money to cater for what government should be doing for them? So these are the broader conversation that these reforms would address, and we'll begin to see the impact from January next year, 2026.
Well, at this point, all eyes are pretty much on what the reform will look like, and implementation, most importantly, transparency and accountability, because there's also enough that needs to be said about the informal sector. But I wish we had enough time to have this discussion, but we must say thank you to you, sir, for taking out the time to join us on the program. Thank you so much for coming on.